Since Sword and Shield, we've had a wide array of different formats that have existed for VGC thanks to the different regulations. But one format we haven't quite explored yet would be a format that only utilized the first stage Pokemon, specifically the ones that would fall under the Little Cup classification. Today, let's explore that concept and see what a format like that could actually provide. While I can't literally predict every aspect of a format that we've never officially played, we might be able to apply some archetype knowledge from our current format and just see what might be able to currently work. We have a lot to break down today, so with that out of the way, let's just get started into what could be our top contenders. Now, VGC has a few different things that I would classify as very fundamental to any format, regardless of what the rule set is, and we're going to explore each of those. We have our field conditions such as Weather and Trick Room, our field control moves like Follow Me and Fake Out, our damage mitigation, which would be things like Intimidate or Friend Guard, and then just generally good Pokemon that shape the format by dictating what offensive and defensive pieces can work. Let's start off with field conditions that would actually even be present in VGC LC, because there's a lot that really would be possible, but not a lot of things you would actually look into using. There are 10 main field conditions that players typically use in any given VGC format, and these are the 4 weathers, the 4 terrains, Trick Room, and Tailwind. Now, we can definitely axe 3 of these right away though, because all the terrains besides grassy terrain are pretty inaccessible. Because of this, we would already be able to find a very quick option in VGC that would have a very high usage rate because of the lack of competition for terrain, being Grookey. Now, Grookey would definitely just play quite literally how it does for Rillaboom in the current format, with Fake Out, Wood Hammer, U-Turn, and Grassy Glide being its main moveset. Grookey provides us with a really strong Fake Out user that can punish a lot of different players, and it overall kind of shapes how you need to play in a different game. Grookey is a pretty versatile Pokemon, and I think it would to a degree fill a similar role to what Incineroar does for the Scarlet and Violet Regulation G format. But at the same time though, the power level is going to be so much higher than Grookey when talking about this tier that I don't really think it'll have that same 60% plus usage rate. While we could technically see Misty Terrain utilized on a Pokemon like Impidimp in order to just mitigate Grookey, I think there's a lot of better Pokemon with a much higher power level that could just honestly be a far better check and a much better use of resources. Now, moving into the weather, I think we do have a bit more of dynamic options to talk about. Starting off, we have Snover and Alolan Vulpix that can set snow, Hippopotas, which is a really good sand setter, and Vulpix, which can also be used to set sun. Other than this, you're most likely setting the weather with prankster Pokemon such as Cottony, Riolu, Impidimp. I think the big #1 weather setter though in any VGC LC format would have to be Murkrow. Now, Murkrow in my opinion is another big cornerstone piece in VGC, and I think with the LC VGC format in particular, this would be a monster. This is essentially going to be our Tornadus Incarnate replacement, and it has a lot of good support that it can take advantage of, such as Taunt, Haze, Quash, Tailwind, and any other weather setting moves. You could also lean into an offensive option like Brave Bird and Foul Play, and considering the fact that Murkrow is a surprisingly strong option in this type of format, Brave Bird is a lot more spammable now, and it's also a great means of checking Grookey. Murkrow would probably be the best Tailwind setter in the format in my opinion, due to the fact you would have a good priority option and also the ability to set weather control, which will be pretty important in a format like this. I'm gonna go over Rain first and how that would operate, because I think that Rain is not only the best format and the best means of using Murkrow as a prankster weather setter, but I think it also just has the best abusers. Rain is probably one of the only weathers that I think that a Swift Swim option could potentially work, so a Pokemon like Weasel might actually see some play here. Though I think honestly, just like with Scarlet and Violet's main format, we're going to be looking a lot more into wall breakers, specifically Basculin White Stripe. And I think Basculin White Stripe is going to be most comparable to how Palafin was in a format like Regulation C, where it'll be a really destructive option on teams that need a good priority water type that will also be able to wall break through most opponents after just a couple turns. Thanks to Last Respects and Wave Crash, just like with Palafin, you're probably saving this more for the late game, and you can definitely get some very serious damage in, especially with the adaptability boosted Wave Crash in the rain. Now, you would probably need the safety goggles on Basculin almost exclusively as a means to avoid Rage Powder Fungus with Rocky Helmet. That would become a very quick predator for this Pokemon. And because of the fact that you can't just tear it into grass due to the fact that adaptability would go away, Basculin would most likely just settle for safety goggles, and it'd be a pretty powerful Pokemon nonetheless though. Meanwhile, Sun has a lot of cool partners such as Cottony and Bulbasaur, but I think it would still be pretty niche due to the fact that there's a lot of top tier Pokemon that do check these. I think in tandem with something like a Choice Scarf Charmander though on a Tailwind Sun team, this could potentially do some work though, but I think it would at best be more utilized as a response to rain teams rather than their own really standard archetype. If you want to use a snow team, I think both Snover and Alolan Vulpix have some genuine reasons to be used here, since Alolan Vulpix now lacks the fairy typing that is really potent on Alolan Ninetales, though still being the faster of the two means that you can potentially use this as a really quick fail setter and set up some really good support for your team that way. Similar to VGC right now though, I don't really think Sand is going to get a lot of usage, but Drillbur and Hippopotas probably is a little bit more of a niche than T-Tar X Control does in the current format, so it's at least something I would say to keep an eye on. For our final 2 field conditions, let's talk about Trick Room and Tailwind in VGC. Now, we've already covered Murkrow and how good that could be in VGC, and I do still think it is truly the best relevant Tailwind option, though there are still a lot of cool other options. Starting off, we have Fletchling, which I think is a lot more of an offensive offensively oriented piece, specifically banking on the fact that you do still have a lot of heavy priority here. This would be a lot more limited in moveset though, because a lot of the cool utility that Talonflame gets, Fletchling unfortunately does not. Because Fletchling misses out on key moves like Feint and Will-O-Wisp, I think Fletchling would instead utilize a moveset such as Tailwind, a flying stab of choice such as Brave Bird, Taunt, and Quick Attack or Protect as that final spot. And I think that despite the fact that it's missing out on a lot of key things that make Talonflame really good, you would still potentially see some play as a really good offensive check for Grookey that can hit before Grookey does. Because Cottony doesn't have Tailwind access anymore, I think Fletchling would objectively be the number 2 Pokemon for setting Tailwind exclusively in VGC. But there are a lot of other cool setters such as Cutiefly, Gligar, Scyther, Hoppip, Wattrel, Vullaby, and Drifloon, to name a very select few among the wide pool that can. Meanwhile, as far as Trick Room setters go, I think this is a bit more difficult to pinpoint the very best, but there are 3 setters that I think all could be pretty relevant. Mischievous would typically be utilized as a nice ghost-type defensive option with a Violate that has some pretty respectable stats to it, with Stantler also being a cool normal-type option that could provide a team with Intimidate and Trick Room in the same spot, and Porygon would be a similar option typing-wise to Stantler, but it would have some really good built-in recovery to it, and it would be specially oriented instead. As far as other cool Trick Room setters though, we still have Meditite, Drowsy, Drifloon, Gothita, Poltergeist, and the Slowpokes that could all potentially have viability, but I think those first 3 would definitely take the cake. Now obviously when players think of Field Control, one of the most relevant moves is Protect, but I don't really need to talk about Pokemon that are utilizing this move, so instead we're going to start off with Fake Out, which is probably the second best means of Field Control, and VGC LC has a lot of different options. Some of the best Pokemon that come to mind would be Meditite, Grookey, Scraggy, Litten, Meowth, Impidimp, Pichu, Mienfoo, and both Sneasels. Among these, I think the best results would come from Grookey, Litten, and the Sneasel forms, but the entire pool could definitely see some serious results here. The Sneasel forms both have a built-in Intimidate immunity, which is going to be pretty helpful with not only damage reduction, but also avoiding the Fake Out turn. Not only this though, you could actually potentially utilize these as a really good fast option for your team, as there are no Pokemon that naturally outpace these in the tier without something such as Tailwind, a Choice Scarf, or opposing Thunder Wave. Both these two have vastly different dual stabs, with the Jotonian form having a Dark Ice dual stab, and the Hisui form having a Poison Fighting stab. So you could very easily fit at least one of these onto really any team you're building. I think Litten would still have a decent role, but it's going to be far from what Incineroar would be due to a few key factors. With Litten missing out on the Dark typing, it now unfortunately can be susceptible to Prankster Taunt, which is a pretty big deal when you're pivoting out. Also with both the Sneasel forms as well as Gligar having a complete immunity to Intimidate without Clear Amulet, and these would definitely be some of the best Pokemon in the format anyway, Litten would definitely have a lot going against it in this current format, though I still do think it would be one of the better Pokemon to choose from. As for redirection, we only have a few different options that can follow me, such as Elekid, Magby, and Sentret. I think Magby and Elekid could potentially see some niche play due to the fact that their abilities are pretty decent at potentially harming opponents, and these could definitely be suited towards more of an Ogerpon style redirection. Because of this though, I think the number 1 redirector would be by far Fungus, which takes after its parent Amoonguss in terms of how it would not only utilize itself, but also in just how potent it would be. This is gonna be pretty easy. It would literally just run the same set Amoonguss does, but with either a Violate, Rocky Helmet, or a Citrus Berry, and it would be very difficult to KO for the format. You could in theory also run an option like Scatterbug or Poltergeist though, but for better or worse, I think these two would be very far away from the quality that Fungus would provide. Finally, let's talk about our best means of damage reduction on this tier. As far as Friend Guard users go, there really aren't too many noteworthy options, but I think Cleffa is technically the best Pokemon in this bunch. I think if Cleffa kept Follow Me, this would actually be a serious contender for a strong option, but for our primary damage reduction, I think we're looking more towards Screens and Intimidate due to the fact that the Friend Guard Pokemon just are not that good. For Screens, I think we're exclusively looking at Impidimp due to the fact that it is Prankster as well for an ability, and it would probably just utilize options like Fake Out and Thunder Wave for really good support here. Now, Impidimp definitely could be helpful on certain teams, but unfortunately its stats are really bad even for Little Cup VGC standards, so I don't think it'll be a mainstay. As far as Intimidate goes, I do think we actually have a lot of options here, and this is where we'll see the most of our damage reduction. I've already talked about Litten and Stantler vaguely, but I do think we have a couple other serious contenders. Starting off, let's talk about Snubbull, which I think actually has a lot more to be considered here as opposed to its evolution Granbull, mainly due to the fact that the Violet item actually helps it a lot in this format. Because there's a serious lack of really good offensive responses to Snubbull, I think Snubbull could potentially actually utilize a set with something like Terra Steel as a good check to dragons, as we don't really have a lot of great steel types either. Specifically with one dragon in particular, Duraludon, this would be a very important typing to have, and a pure steel type with Intimidate could be pretty good for mitigating heavy slam damage, and the special bulk with the Violet would be respectable. I think our other really good Intimidate option though that would be far and away better than Snubbull would be Hisui Quillfish. Now Hisui Quillfish does lack the momentum that Litten would provide, but I think its typing is far better, thanks to the poison and dark typing only having one weakness. You still have some pretty good options though, such as Haze, Destiny Bond, Pokemon in Pain Split, as well as the move Taunt, which Litten has. And I think Taunt would be the big thing in tandem with this typing that could pressure a lot of different teams. Unlike Litten though, I do think this would struggle a little bit if particularly Pawniard rose to use, due to the fact that it would actually be able to pressure Hisui Qwilfish a lot better, due to the fact that Qwilfish really cannot damage Pawniard at all. I think besides Pawniard, Gligar, and the Sneasels though, I think Qwilfish is a really difficult Pokemon for this format to take down though, so I think it would still have a lot of relevance in VGC right now. Finally, let's address some of the other just generally good Pokemon that would be good in VGC LC. I can't go over what literally every Pokemon would do here, but I do want to highlight a very few key options that I haven't already touched on. For starters, our upper tier format of defining Pokemon I think definitely skews very fast, with two of the fastest Pokemon both being the Sneasels and Scyther all being really difficult to take on, and they both have incredible offensive stats. Besides Scyther, I've pretty much touched on what all of these options do, but I think Scyther would definitely just opt towards being a really good Swords Dance option with options like Technician, Dual Wing Beat, and Bug Bite. Now Scyther can definitely also be a good Tailwind setter too, due to the fact that it has some pretty respectable bulk, but I think it's just a lot better at being an offensive piece, similar to how Choice Scarf Landorus was in Regulation D. Now looking at some other Pokemon that could still be pretty potent that deserve a mention, I think Gligar is a good place to start. As well, it's not as aggressive as Scyther, it has a better typing and an Intimidated immunity built in, so I think it will definitely see a lot of play. Duraludon also just has the best base stat total of any Pokemon in this format and a really gross typing that is very difficult for this format to handle. Finally, Tandemaus is going to be a pretty surprisingly good pick. I did some testing vaguely against some friends of mine way back in Regulation C for this type of format, and Tandemaus with Wide Lens Population Bomb Terra Normal is a very obnoxious Pokemon to switch around. And considering there's only really two noteworthy ghosts being Ghastly and Mischievous, and one noteworthy Steel type being Duraludon, this is going to be a very huge nuisance for most teams to handle. Now this tier list, I try to cover as many Pokemon as possible, so if you do see your favorite on here and I didn't go over it in the video, make sure to let me know down below, as I'd love to potentially let you know why I think this Pokemon could be good or not in VGC, and if there's something I might have missed as well entirely, feel free to let me know down below as well. Also, if you enjoyed videos like this where I speculate about different formats that we haven't actually gotten to have, make sure to leave a like in the video and subscribe for more, as I love to do a lot of this hypothetical VGC content on the channel, as I think it's really interesting. Also, consider becoming a channel member, as it's a great way to support the content going forward, as it helps me just get more that I can use towards paying Kurt and Becca just for all the hard work they put into content. For starters, we have Kurt, who edited the video you're seeing today and handles all of our long-form content. If you enjoy other Pokemon content, especially the Draft League side of things, make sure to check out Kurt, as he should be uploading again soon as of the time of me posting this video. Also, we do have a short form editor, Becca, whose links will be down below, as she mostly streams on Twitch, and she does a lot of different gaming content. She's an incredible streamer, and I highly recommend you guys check her out as well, but unfortunately I can't put her link in the top. With that said, I will see you guys in next week's video. Until then, peace out, guys.